Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, December 9th, 2021. Running out of December rapidly, so time to get out and get shopping, I guess. If you're one of those people who believe in that. And I guess I will be, probably later today, as a matter of fact. Good morning, everybody. Time for another show. Everything on the up and up, thanks, Justice. And my morning tweet arrived already from Bill, letting you know what's going on in today's show in a fake way. It's fun. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. That part is true, not even fake at all. And if you defy Kagro X's subpoena to listen, getting into fake territory already, you will be held in contempt. That's a maybe too. And thrown into the basement jail cell. Yes, he has one, according to Wikipedia. It's true, we built it out just yesterday. Getting ready to imprison each and every one of you, one at a time, during the holidays. I don't know. Sound like the sort of thing you would end with on that. Anyway, we'll have to work on getting that cell ready. We'll have to work on holding people in contempt. Lots of discussion about that because, generally speaking, not too much happening, actually. The only person so far who the January 6th committee has referred a contempt citation for to the DOJ, things began moving, but you know how it is with the way that the wheels of justice turn. I think they've scheduled Steve Bannon's trial for criminal contempt, which, won't even necessarily produce the papers by itself, for July. So, we'll get around to it at some point. We're at that point halfway through the remaining time, or I should say the time remaining in the 117th Congress, which may be the only one, if things go badly at the election, maybe the only one during which the January 6th committee operates. Unless, of course, Republicans do take over and they decide to keep the committee operating and simply change its makeup and start targeting Democrats for it, saying that they were the ones that really launched the attack, along with Antifa, and they can give the congressional imprimatur at last to that stupid theory, which would be an option available for them. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. We should discuss a lot of alternatives and what might happen. Maybe it'll scare people into voting Democratic for the House. It would be helpful if it did. I don't want to necessarily have that be the primary message, etc. You've got to have that positive message, or so we're told, or led to believe. But there are some severe negative consequences out there. And we'll focus on the negative today because it's Thursday. I don't know. And then on Friday, we'll just even do more negative stuff. Probably, but I don't know. We'll throw you a curveball or two as well. Today, the job of throwing you the curveball belongs to Greg Dworkin, who is steeling himself for his appearance. I don't know. Maybe it's an easy thing to do. I hope so. We try and make it comfortable, but he's got his Rafto stories ready to go. Looks like there's plenty of them, and he's ready. Okay, so let's just open the door. We might as well just get started. I don't have anything else to say to interrupt or delay at this point. If anybody has any suggestions, quickly text them to me, or he's going to start. All right. Well, good morning, Greg. You ready to go? Yeah, take your time. It's all right.
Yeah, I'm all ready to go. Just trying to figure out which buttons are Skype and which buttons are the...
That one, right? That one?
The pre-play, so I could hear some of the stuff you talk about before we get there. You started with January 6th committee, so I think we should do a little bit of that.
Okay, sure. They are active, but nothing happens.
But, moment. Things will happen when they have their big televised hearings in January.
Ah, okay. Oh, good. Yes, right.
Right? I mean, they're setting all that up. They had an 8-hour briefing on how the timeline is supposed to play out, and they're getting information bit by bit. This by Ryan Goodman, for example, was yesterday,
Let us see.
11 hours ago. Ali Alexander opening statement before Select Committee shows growing infighting among January 6 rally organizers under scrutiny of investigations. He points the finger at the Women for America First leadership, including Katrina Pearson and a name you might know, Amy Kramer, a name you might not know.
Yeah, maybe not.
And says that I was trying to de-escalate the violence. They were at the Willard having champagne.
Oh, well, that's probably true in terms of
I
what they were
tried to
doing.
de-escalate the violence. I tried to get them when they organized the rally, because I was part of the
champagne.
organizer, of course. I wanted them to clearly state where they were supposed to go after the rally to avoid any violence. They removed that and then removed me. So none of this was my fault.
Sure. Well, I'm going to lean closer to almost all of it being his fault. And, it's a good thing to do. I mean, honestly, the cleanest hands of the bunch of the people who want to have champagne.
Yesterday of Republican infighting. So,
good.
There's still a lot of that going on.
Well, criminal proceedings will do that to you.
And then Mark Meadows, who is now refusing to cooperate any more than he already has, says that Hugo Lowell from The Guardian reports the January 6th committee obtained from Trump White House Chief Meadows a January 5th email of a 38-page PowerPoint for options for January 6th and certain text messages from his personal cell phone he relinquished after January 6th.
Okay, that's a lot of PowerPoint.
Okay. Benny Thompson says in a letter that Meadows agreed to waive executive privilege on these.
Really?
He suggests claiming executive privilege on emails and texts suggests he didn't comply with Presidential Records Acts, which is a fancy way of saying he was probably using a private server.
Yeah. What about his
Google
emails?
Or something like that. It's about his emails. So, he wasn't in a position to say this is privileged. Well, it was privileged. Why were you using non-official emails to send emails and texts?
That should destroy some of that executive privilege.
So, now he's going to go ahead and try and sue on the basis of you have no right to even talk to me.
Oh.
Which really isn't going to go anywhere.
Well, we don't
now
like
he's
it.
suing the committee.
All
and the committee's going to say, fine, whatever. And again, what they're doing is putting together a timeline with the lower down folks. So the fact that the famous names are refusing to cooperate really isn't going to hinder much. It's going to be something of a show regardless, and so that ought to be kept in mind.
All right. So when the Hallmark Channel stops showing Christmas movies, we can switch to this.
So let me give you an example of how that might work, and this is from Ryan Goodman, who had a deep dive on the criminal cases from January 6th.
All right.
Okay, out of hundreds of January 6th criminal cases, the FBI cites defendants' posts on Facebook, Twitter, and Parler. But what's missing, and I included a picture of this, one of the screenshots at the very end of what I sent here.
Oh, I see.
The ominous-looking one in colors.
Yeah.
Okay. Absent is a public social media site that served as a staging ground for the attack on the Capitol. And that public social media site is called thedonald.win.
All right.
Okay. Our analysis is thanks to many great experts and, cites many of them. We build on prior important reporting by Ken Delanian and others in an NBC News piece that also relied on research by Advocacy for Democracy. The feds aren't using posts about plans to attack the Capitol as evidence. Another important news report was this article in the Washington Post in April, Gallows or Guillotines, the chilling debate on the Donald.win before January 6th.
I think they should
and then
get the guillotine.
FBI's Norfolk report, you may have heard of this,
No.
sent to law enforcement agencies on January 5th, warning of users calling for war to get violent.
Okay, yes. I see. It came from the
That was all from
field
the Donald.
office. Right. Okay. The Donald.
And they have pictures.
The Donald. Yes. Right.
For weeks, users discussed techniques, tactics, procedures, materials and measurements for guillotines, how to snap a person's neck, how to use a flagpole as a weapon,
They love that. They love that stuff.
which zip ties to bring. And then the picture I sent you is a picture documenting where the Capitol tunnels were.
Okay,
All of this was
right.
on the Donald. Right? And as we explained, FBI, DOJ may have tactical reasons for not including references to communications on the Donald, regardless of the reason. It comes with potentially significant costs in prosecuting cases and identifying actors most responsible for January 6th. And then they have a whole bunch more screenshots, which are pretty ominous. And how this is all going to play out, I am not really sure. I don't know whether the January 6th committee has this or is holding on to it for other reasons. It's really unclear. But there's a lot of material out there.
Yes,
So he writes, given all the above, it's striking that out of several hundred individuals now charged with unlawful conduct, the government makes reference to only one defendant's communications on the Donald, And in contrast, the government's violence is Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Telegram, all sorts of other stuff. It may reflect a conscious decision on the part of the government because they don't want to harm investigations and prosecutions.
Yeah, okay.
But they may have, factual discrepancies in indictments if they don't include it. So unclear what's going on, and that's going to have to play out.
All right, let's play.
But, just keep that in mind. It's not like there's no material for the January 6th committee to work with here.
Oh, right. Well, one thing we know is there's never a shortage of material. We know that.
We know that. But it turns out that's true for them as well. And
will
then
anyone listen to their
something
show?
else, with that as background.
Yes.
Because we did have this, attack on democracy. I want to follow up with some of the stuff we were talking about yesterday. Remember, we were talking about Tennessee and how they're putting pressure on the medical board.
Yes. That was actually quite interesting.
Not sanction docs who are blatantly lying about the COVID-19.
Right. Just change the rules. All the things that are against the rules are now okay if you're a Republican. But we remember that rule from a long time ago. It's just, okay. I'm cool with that.
It is okay.
We're up to speed.
I want to go back to some of the things that we brought up in a slightly different context.
All right.
And talk to you about that and other things that also, sort of go into this intimidation bucket, if you will. And let's start with that Tim Alberta piece yesterday that I mentioned from The Atlantic. I mentioned it in the context of Republicans and infighting.
Right.
Right?
I remember
that. Perhaps the key part of that is that the day that he was there to vote on impeachment, and
Peter Mayer or whatever.
Peter Mayer, Republican, and he was one of the voters. A lot of this comes from the certification vote.
Yes. Right.
That was to take place. And he winds up talking to one of his colleagues who he expected, to vote to certify the election, and ultimately expected to vote with him to impeach Trump.
Right. Okay.
And he
unnamed colleague
thought of himself as kind of he's a newcomer. He doesn't have a lot of stuff he wants to hold on to because he doesn't have that much.
Okay.
Right, and he feels that he's trying to fight the problem within his party, and he's going to have all sorts of primary stuff that's going to be, fought against. But at one point, this is what Tim Alberta writes. At one point, Meyer described to me the psychological forces at work in his party, the reason so many Republicans have refused to confront the tragedy of January 6th and the nature of the ongoing threat. Some people are motivated by raw power. Others have acted out of partisan spite or ignorance or warped perceptions of truth and lies. But the chief explanation is fear. People are afraid for their safety.
That's not great.
They are afraid for their careers. Above all, they're afraid of fighting a losing battle in an empty foxhole. I just feel lonely, he said with exasperation. Most of his colleagues, Mayor believes, want to be with him. They pat him on the back. They whisper encouragement. They say they're rooting for his side, but they don't think his side can win, so they do nothing, convincing themselves that the problem will take care of itself while guaranteeing that it will only get worse.
Yes.
And he talks about, talking to one of his colleagues who he expected to vote with him. And he said, are you okay? And his colleague said, no, I'm not okay. I mean, they're going to come after my family. I can't vote for this.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard
That's
that
in the
story.
article.
It is, and I think that story has been told before. I recall hearing that, and he was the source of it. So, I mean, it's been told before, but it deserves reiteration because, in this atmosphere, even the most outrageous things get plowed under by the next outrageous thing. But yeah, this guy was saying, I know that we should be voting to impeach him. I know that we should be voting to purge him from politics forever, but I'm afraid to do it. I'm not at home. My family is on their own. I'm isolated here. He's like physically worried that his family would be attacked if
I mean, if they can attack in the Capitol, like,
which
you know,
is
what
kind
about
of terrorism? Yeah, right.
So, right? So that's the
great.
Tim Alberta piece on Peter Mayer.
Yeah.
And then we also mentioned, but didn't go over much, the Barton Gellman article, also in the Atlantic.
Yes.
About how Donald Trump is actively doing the insurrection now, even as we speak.
Yes.
And the one paragraph that strikes me from that one is Trump has reconquered his party by setting its base on fire. Tens of millions of Americans perceive their world through black clouds of his smoke. His deepest source of strength is the bitter grievance of Republican voters that they lost the White House and are losing the country to alien forces with no legitimate claim to power. Immigrants and black people, in other words.
No.
This is not some transient or loosely committed population. Trump's built the first American mass political movement in the past century that is ready to fight by any means necessary, including bloodshed, for its cause. So when you step back and think about this, you can do it in the very anodyne way that polls do, which suggests that Republicans are more motivated than Democrats.
Yes, right. Or they strongly disagree with the direction of the country, or something.
Right,
like that.
which sounds really, bland.
Yes.
But if this is what's going on here, and that's the passion behind why they're motivated, things happen. Things between, who turns out at elections, and there's a recent piece on that about Virginia, by Alan Abramowitz that's worth discussing. And he's got this explaining what happened in Virginia in 2020. And again echoes a lot of what you've said about Loudoun County.
Well, all right.
The county didn't change.
Yeah.
What happened is that the rural areas turned out just like Florida when Clinton lost to Trump in 2016. In a way, the way Ohio went for W instead of Kerry. In other words, the Democrats hit their numbers, and then surprisingly, the Republicans hit even higher numbers.
Yes, surprisingly, and they surprisingly keep doing it, and then saying, I don't know. What's weird is that their minds immediately turn to there was massive fraud, and
But that's what motivates those folks to come out.
Yes, or
I mean, they don't believe it,
maybe
but they
their
know
votes
that that's
don't come
what makes
out,
their
and there is
votes come
massive
out.
fraud. I don't know. It's weird.
So,
they have that projection problem.
Alan Abramowitz says the results of the 2021 gubernatorial election in Virginia and New Jersey showed a strong swing toward the Republican Party. However, county-level data shows that voting patterns in the gubernatorial election were pretty similar to those in the presidential election. And exit poll data from Virginia showed very few Biden voters actually switched. Instead, it appears that the shift in election results between 2020 and 2021 was due largely to disproportionate partisan mobilization, that is to say, stronger turnout among Republican voters than among Democratic voters in the off-year elections. Now, that may sound very, more Republicans voted than Democrats, and so the Republicans won. Well, but what it's really saying is that Republican voters were willing to turn out in an off-year election in numbers greater than expected, and Democrats weren't. And if Democrats are younger voters who don't traditionally turn out in off-year elections and so on and so forth, that's really what's going on here. What isn't in the data doesn't mean it doesn't happen or it didn't happen, but you can't find it in the data. There isn't enough data to support or refute the concept. Is that somehow or other the Democrats lost black, Latino, minority voters. There's none of that.
Okay.
What happened is that the rurals just said, every single one of us is going to turn out. And if Democrats don't figure out how to get their party to have the same kind of passion about protecting democracy as the Republicans do about overthrowing democracy, we're in big trouble. And that's why we're in big trouble, by the way.
Right. But, that's true. Of course, if you don't come to cast your vote, then maybe you aren't that crazy about democracy after all.
Well, if you consider that to be a messaging issue, good luck. I think that there's a lot going on here. At the same time, it doesn't mean that just because they didn't show up in 2021 in an off year, that somehow or other they won't show up in 2022 or 2024. That's what happens all the time when you try to read these off-year or off-year elections and try to figure out what that means for the next one. And sometimes it means a lot, and sometimes it doesn't mean anything. And you can only tell that after the fact when you look backwards.
True. Unfortunately, the next big election coming up is one of those other ones that isn't the presidential one that people don't show up for.
Well, that's the off-year election, but
Yes,
the
this was the
gubernatorial
off-off.
in Virginia was the off year. Off Broadway.
Right, exactly. I'm off Broadway. I mean, come on.
Yeah. So, given that that's the bent of the Republican Party, that they're all in on the lost cause,
but they're winning.
We just have to keep that in mind, and that's the background. So now, when you look at Tennessee and their Republican legislature trying to put pressure, this is the Daily Beast version. We talked about this on the show yesterday from the Tennessean version. Tennessee Medical Board removes COVID misinformation warning after GOP pressure.
Right.
And then there's this article, which is dated December 6th from Tampa Bay Times. University of Florida researchers felt pressure to destroy COVID-19 data, faculty report says.
Oh, okay.
Faculty Senate panel alleges more violations of academic freedom. Remember, this is the place that tried to suppress Daniel Smith and Mike McDonald from testifying against Ron DeSantis in a voting rights case.
Yeah, this left-wing free speech suppression on campus has got to stop. Right.
Now, under pressure, University of Florida backed off the voting rights thing, and we'll have to see what happens with this one. DeSantis' response to this is it never happened. But generally speaking, when they say something never happened, it happened, and that's the whole point of the January 6th committee in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
all right, well.
Again, what we're looking at is a background of thuggery, pressure, intimidation, in some cases, against professionals. And I guess my point is that when you're looking to see how Congress responds as an institution, which is to say highlighting institutional weakness, you need to be aware of the institutional weaknesses in places like universities, hospitals and hospital associations, medical boards, all of the institutions that you assume are there because, everybody knows this is simply how it works. You go back to the McCarthy era, they're not immune to this pressure. And we're seeing it now, and we're seeing them fold.
Yeah, that's true. And we keep wondering about what are the, how well will
how did
the
the
guardrails
1950s happen?
hold up?
You're looking at it.
I guess so. Well, yeah, it's worrisome and troubling. And this is the second time in maybe a month that we've heard the similar stories out of the university system in Florida. They're just basically
you wonder
whatever
what's going
he
on
needs.
in Texas. Maybe they're afraid to talk.
Maybe. It's the Tampa Bay Tampa Bay Times piece shows up here, in abbreviated form in Skype, and it reads just the first part of the headline, but it was a little more worrisome. UF researchers felt pressure to destroy COVID-19 data, faculty, and then it just stops.
Yeah.
Wow. They felt pressure to destroy the faculty. But in fact, that's essentially what they're doing by undermining their ability to do serious academic work and be directed by political officials instead.
You'll read other stories about universities trying to get rid of tenure. I think they did that in Georgia.
And so all the professors loved it and moved there?
Yeah, something along those lines.
Or maybe possibly the opposite.
But again, be aware of the enormous pressure that's going on. Every election matters, whether it's school board, whether it's gubernatorial. The governors often appoint the chancellors and the trustees who wind up putting pressure on the state university systems and the state hospitals, and through the hospital associations. And then threatening to withhold funds is a very powerful motivator. So there's an awful lot of that going on.
We'll discover more and more about the channels of power and the hidden authorities and powers that elected officials and appointed officials, named by those elected officials, often have, which will bring me to a topic later on about the right-wing fantasy / our horror movie scenario of Matt Gaetz reminding everybody, if Republicans win the House next year, I don't know if anyone intends to go with him, but I intend to nominate Donald Trump for the position of Speaker of the House. I can spend some time later on examining just how horrific that is. I'm sure you have a good picture of it, but all the things that are hidden powers.
There's no way he's going to do it.
Well, I would like to address that at some point. I'm not certain that it would be. I mean, it is for Nancy Pelosi because she wants the House to function. What if the Speaker of the House doesn't give a crap one way or the other whether the House functions or not? How much work is it really? We'll find out, or I hope we never do, but we certainly could. I mean, I'm just working off of your chaos agent theory. I mean, does a Speaker of the House who's a chaos agent care whether there's work involved or not? Probably not.
I'm a little skeptical he'd have the votes for that, but
now that's a different story. But yeah, I don't think so either. But I don't know. I didn't think the other guy had the votes to win in 2016 either. But then the computer said he did.
Right. So in the minute before the break, I'll simply cite this David Rothkopf article, which I think completes the be aware of the fascism that's growing in the United States. Right. And David Rothkopf in the Daily Beast has a piece called "The First Rule of the Democracy Club: Be a Damn Democracy."
Oh.
That's in regard to Joe Biden calling a democracy summit.
Okay.
He's excluded China and Russia.
Well, they're not democracies.
Right. And inclusion is a stamp of approval.
Yeah.
And so the Philippines and Brazil are there.
Oh. Well, I guess thumbs up to them.
Modi's there.
Okay. It's sort of democratic, too.
Pakistan,
kinda.
Poland.
All right. We'd be getting carried away a little bit. All right, but they wanted to deliver a message about Russia and China.
Just clean up your stuff at home first.
Yeah, right. I know we're going to have a difficult time lecturing everybody, but as we always do, they always come prepared, the rest of the world, to remind us that we really shouldn't be lecturing them about human rights or democracy, that we're not all that great.
No, the rest of the world
that's
often
fine,
has
but we're pretty good.
Yeah,
they do.
Like the normal handoff of democracy in Germany as chancellors change.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We continue on. I'm saving the crazy Donald Trump speculation for later, for the second hour, the crazy hour of our show. How about that?
Well, there's only so much I can take.
Right. You have pandemic to deal with. That's crazy enough.
I do want to mention that, since that is still going on. Interesting things happening. Howard Foreman, doc at Yale, who follows this, has been looking at the hospitalizations in South Africa.
Oh, okay. Well, they're not.
Whereas the hospitalizations are up 65% week over week, this week to last week, and Gauteng province, where the outbreak of Omicron was, is up 71%. Actually, in some ways, that's less than the case rate growths. That is to say, the hospitalizations aren't nearly matching how fast the cases are growing.
All right.
And there's a couple of things to learn. Again, we still need more information about the severity and all of that.
We should go get it.
Well, it'll take a couple of weeks to get.
Oh, well, I'll wait.
But what we're learning is a number of things. Younger people are being hospitalized, including children, in South Africa.
Bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
And since a lot of people are getting sick in an area where a lot of people had previously been infected, it sort of puts the exclamation mark on the concept that previous infection with different variants doesn't protect you against Omicron, whereas vaccination may well. And so it may wind up being
normal.
less severe. That is to say, more people are getting sick, but less people, relatively speaking, are winding up in the hospital.
Okay.
Because they've been previously infected, and the subsequent infections aren't as bad in people who have either been vaccinated or previously infected.
Okay.
So the point there is that it doesn't say anything about the virus itself. When you're talking about the virus, and we talked about this yesterday with comments by Ashish Jha, when you're talking about the virus, there's a difference between how the virus acts in somebody who's never seen it before. And there's still a lot of people in this country who have neither been infected nor gotten vaccinated, particularly in red states.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between how it acts with them, and you have to look at them to really figure out how severe the virus is.
Okay.
The population that's already had some sort of exposure may have milder effects, which is in a way good because, a lot of the country either has already been infected or been vaccinated. So the overall impact on the country may be less. But that doesn't say as much about the virus as it does the practical aspects of how the virus hits a particular population.
Okay.
So you see a lot of confusion and sort of muddling about, how bad is this virus? And the answer is always going to be, it depends. There's nuance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, complicated. Well, you don't want it. You shouldn't try to get it.
You certainly shouldn't get it if you've never had anything before. If you wind up being vaccinated, especially with a booster, you're probably okay. But there's still a lot of people who haven't had the full series of vaccinations or have been vaccinated at all. And so even if breakthrough severe illness is much less common in the groups that have some sort of prior infection, a large number of people with a small number of breakthroughs will give you a large number of breakthroughs.
That's true. That's the way numbers are.
That's the way numbers are.
Try to get them to stop, but they won't do it.
When Howie Foreman is looking at South Africa, he says, so far what he concludes is we need more information, but it's possible prior infection and prior vaccine-based immunity are holding up to reduce morbidity and mortality. Mm-hmm. We don't know about lower virulence because we don't really know what population is getting hit right now. And we're seeing a disproportionately younger and healthier population getting sick.
Yeah.
So that's what you can expect in the United States as this spreads.
Okay.
And that's, not great, but not as bad as it could be.
There's still vast numbers of people in the country who haven't been infected, as you pointed out. I mean, and the ones you're really worried about are the ones who haven't been infected and who haven't gotten any vaccine, largely because, aside from the ideology behind it, they're probably walking around saying, this pandemic's been going on for 2 years and I haven't been sick yet, so I guess that's the way it's going to be forever.
Yeah, you say it's flu season, but I didn't get the flu. They must be lying that flu exists.
Right.
Well, you don't get it every year, but the year you do get it, you feel like you've been hit by a truck.
It's true. It's difficult for them to process. 50 million people in this country have gotten sick. You'd think that would convince people have been infected. But at the same time,
how many have died?
That's 812,000, 813,000.
Yes, but it wasn't me, so it doesn't count. It's like looking at the jobs numbers.
Weird.
We had the lowest, unemployment numbers in 65 years came out today.
Well, all right.
But, somebody pointed out on Twitter, people will choose to have 7% unemployment and $1.50 gas over 3.5% employment and $3 gas.
If they're employed.
Because if I have a job, I don't really care about all those other people.
I just want gas to be cheap.
It's just a recession.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
it's a depression when I'm out of work. That really matters. You want to avoid that.
Yeah.
But if I have a job and you don't, not my problem. Which goes back to the whole, societal problem here of common good and not accepting the fact that what happens to everybody matters. No, it just matters to me. Okay, you want me to be responsible for a group? I'll be responsible for my political tribe. Nobody else.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it is, like with those large numbers, as you were saying. A small percentage of a large number of people is a large number of people. So if you somehow people say, I still think it's a hoax, even though there are literally 50 million Americans. That's a huge number, right? But that's 15% of the population. So 85% of the population hasn't been infected. And among that number are a number of people who think that they haven't been infected either because it's a hoax or they're immune because they lift weights or I've eaten ivermectin and it's working.
Yeah, but do you even lift? I mean, really.
Right.
So just published in the New England Journal of Medicine, a striking 90% reduction in death for booster shots, that is to say, versus not receiving the third shot among over 840,000 people age 50 or older.
What? Okay.
There are not many interventions in medicine that reduce mortality by 90%. So if you get your booster, you're not going to die. Okay, well, 10% of you are.
Or 10% of everybody.
If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Well, you said everybody. Well, like, 90%. Except for the people who are on junk insurance. Well, you didn't say that, so you lied.
Oh. Yeah. Well, we could communally decide that we'll all just die 10%. And then everybody lives. But
no,
we're just
I'm not going to share
doing
that.
less. Okay.
You take 20, I'll take none. How about that?
Yeah, well, all right. You're Republican now.
Yeah, well, libertarian.
Okay. Yeah, it is unbelievable. Oh, by the way, that number issue reminds me is, again, 50 million people. That's 15% of the country. So when you poll things like, who believes this stupid thing, like horse medicine really works? And, it polls, and you say, I can't believe anybody would say yes, but thank God it's only 15% of the country, and 85% of the country has their head screwed on right. That's 50 million ivermectin eaters.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's pretty astounding to think about. We have a lot of people in this country. Should give some away.
Luckily, there are supply chain issues, so you can't get all the ivermectin you want.
That's
so this is simply a reminder that the pandemic is not over. Right. And we still have, although the Delta wave so far has been relatively mild, we're now next week going to be in the situation of, okay, now we're post-Thanksgiving, let's see what happens. But nonetheless, the Delta wave this year is way smaller than the Delta wave last year, which is what you'd expect from either previous infection or getting your vaccines. But with Omicron spreading, it's just a reminder that the pandemic isn't over, and we still haven't gotten past the point where we can say, okay, don't worry about a winter wave. We still don't know that yet. And uncertainty is something that's important to discuss when we don't know. So in that regard, here is a piece from the Buffalo News, Pandemic Lessons. Maybe you don't like masks, but do they work? Spoiler alert, they do.
All right. That seems like I think we've been over this territory, but...
Right, but the thing I like about it is a very clear message from Lindsay Marr, who's a professor at Virginia Tech, because, we love Virginia. Okay. Who has a PhD in environmental engineering and specializes in the transmission of infectious diseases through aerosols, which makes her a rock star level expert in the world of COVID-19 transmission.
That's an environmental engineer? I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah. Masks are effective, but they're not 100% effective. No one intervention we have is 100% effective. So her advice to people, which I think is very common sense, is stop thinking about terms of safe and unsafe. Add an at the end.
Oh.
Does it make you safer? Does it make you unsafer?
Okay.
More unsafe?
All right.
Okay. If you get vaccinated and you wear a mask, that makes you safer.
Right.
Than just getting vaccinated or just wearing a mask.
All right. Some
if you do masking with vaccination, good ventilation and air filtration and avoiding packed crowds, especially when spread is high, like in Western New York, Buffalo, where this article comes from, that will make things safer.
Okay. The article's in Buffalo and she's from Virginia?
Well, she's the expert because she does aerosols.
Okay, I see. I get you.
Remember, this is an airborne disease, even though most people won't admit it, even now.
Why would people not admit that?
Because, I don't know, but it's very difficult for WHO to, state this is an aerosol disease.
I mean, is it like a phonics thing, pronunciation? They don't know how?
I don't know.
I need to talk to them.
People are scratching their head about that, but, late to the game. Late to the game in terms of why we originally said don't wear masks. Probably won't do any good. We didn't know it was aerosol.
Well, okay, now we do.
Now we do. Okay. So all of that important. So simple interventions.
Yeah.
okay, masking in hospitals, for example, which has been done for years,
Sure.
have largely prevented
All sorts of
outbreaks of
reasons.
respiratory viruses in hospitals. If you work for medical professionals whose job it is to get up close with sick people,
Yeah, they put a
why
mask
shouldn't
on.
it work for the rest of us?
Right.
If you're both stuff the virus if you're infectious and you block the virus if you're trying not to get infected, it's going to work, right? So you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure that out, said Thomas Russo, a rocket scientist. Now, he's chief of infectious disease at the University of Buffalo's Jacobs School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences. So there you have your local color. They asked a local guy.
Okay, that's good. And he's not a rocket scientist, and he figured it out. Therefore,
Right.
he's right.
So, but they reached out to Lindsay Marr because she's an airborne particles expert.
Right. Rockets, by the way, emit airborne particles.
Right. Now, first a caveat. The quality of your face covering matters a lot, and while any barrier is better than no barrier, a bandana is less likely to do good than a multi-layered mask. Wearing an N95 is the best. Most people are wearing a mask that falls between the styles, and you don't have to look far to find somebody insisting that microscopic viruses will slip right through a surgical mask, and it's not that simple. It really does filter out the virus. It's like the stacked Swiss cheese in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a maze for the virus to get through. So there's a lot of different layers, and all of that works.
Yeah, they're not good at mazes.
Right? And then they go on to say, specifically pointing toward Florida, to say masking doesn't work is another example of simplistic thinking, they said in Buffalo.
Right. Well, far away from Florida.
You don't like snow, let me tell you about snow. But that's for another article. Let's talk about what Florida does versus what we do. Several factors are at play here. First, Floridians and others in the South tend to live more of their lives outside.
True.
Outdoor air generally allows you to go mask-free. The one thing that we did learn is that making fun of people going to Florida for spring break and staying out on the beaches was wrong. Not allowing them in bars indoors was right. We learned that from Sturgis. That said, Florida and other southern states have been COVID hotspots. Look to the past summer where most Floridians tend to stay in the air-conditioned indoors to avoid heat. The Delta wave tore through Florida for about 2 months beginning in mid-July, and that was a solid month before New York saw a spike.
Yes. I think that all makes sense, and we've hinted at that before, right? It's about the lifestyle and the way the seasons are kind of reversed.
Right. Florida also hides their death statistics. I don't say that from the crazy lady who accused them. I say that from people who have actually tried to study it and keep removing Florida because the CDC data on deaths doesn't match Florida's own data on deaths.
Right.
They just don't report it. So, Ron DeSantis, in addition to trying intimidating people to not report properly on COVID-19 from universities, also intimidates people not to report properly on COVID-19 from his health department.
Yeah. Right. Well, in the meantime, people are dropping dead, and he doesn't care.
Right.
But please vote for him, no doubt.
So is there proof masking works? Yes. There's the peer-reviewed Science magazine study tracking Bangladesh villages, giving a mask and providing education. Using surgical masks reduced COVID by 11% across the population. For people older than 60, infections were reduced by 35%. And that's with only less than half the population wearing masks. If I recall correctly from that article, cloth masks were only about 5% effective, but still added something. And with less than half the population wearing masks, you have to figure that if more people wore it, that the prevention would be even higher. But still, there's no question that surgical masks work better than cloth masks and that N95s work better than surgical masks.
Yeah. And, wearing a mask will help others as well. I'm just thinking about it. If it's 5% effective, but I'm wearing one, and you're also wearing one, then I guess that's 5% less virus gets out of you and 5% less gets into me, and now we're 10% effective.
Right. So in my area, I mentioned this partly because, again, this is a purple area. Definitely Connecticut's a blue state with purple areas, and my area has elected Republican representatives to Congress in the past, recently has elected Democrats. This past election, as we talked about on the show, wound up going Republican. Why? Because more Republicans turned out and Democrats stayed home. Mm-hmm. Same as Virginia. But even in my area, you can drive to errands and pass signs that are out in people's front lawns that say, "Demask our children."
No.
Well, pretty much no. Of course,
Yeah, I mean,
depends
I
what
say
age.
no.
It's hard to mask a 6-year-old. But
I'm getting pretty good at it.
yeah, but you could do it, and sometimes you have to. And for the most part, people here do what they need to do in order to keep things under control, which is why we're doing better than a lot of different areas. But again, the theme here is simply that it's not over. There is some sense to the recommendations. If they appear muddled, it's because it's complicated and nuanced, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And so people don't like uncertainty. They'd rather set things on fire and say, we'd have a lot more certainty if, white people just ruled everything.
I guess they might.
See January 6th?
Yeah. All right. Well, I reject the model, but okay. I duly noted that they've said this. All right. Well, don't demask your children. Send them to school with the mask on. There's nobody being traumatized, by the way. Certainly no more so than they are by lockdown drills and lockdown drills that turn out not to be drills. So, yeah, well, if you're worried about traumatizing children, welcome to America. Thanks. So where you been? It's not the masks that are doing it.
I don't know. Anyway, here are the exact numbers today. Jobless claims hit a new 52-year low. Weekly claims for unemployment benefits are 184,000 adjusted for seasonal swings. It's the lowest level of initial claims since September 1969, when the figure stood at 182,000. And as Peter Lemieux points out, and when the U.S. workforce was about half as large.
Ah, so all right. We're doing remarkably well. I'm sure I was just looking at the newspaper, and they all said, Biden doing great, everyone loves him. I don't think
people are cranky.
Yeah.
And, a large number
Christmas or whatever.
of folks will never give him credit for anything.
Right.
And then we have the news
15%.
media, which feels obligated to, or as somebody put it, Republicans have a news network and networks that will never say anything good about a Democrat. And Democrats have news networks and outlets that feel obligated to say bad things about everybody. So it's equal.
And in particular, even when things are going well for Democrats, we need to say something lousy about them because our
both
report
sides.
later about Republicans is lousy. So everybody gets a lousy review today.
Right. And then they get really pissy when you point that out to them, by the way. But,
I didn't do that. I watch you every day.
Hmm.
All right. Well,
that's why that Dana Milbank got ruffled feathers so much.
Yeah.
He pointed out that, the news for Biden has been way more negative than the news for Trump, even though Trump's an insurrectionist and, basically killed 500,000 people.
Right. Well, finally, he's got that right. And we can, he's still a dick whisperer, but, I'm glad somebody got that right. He's an influential guy, and you have to take it where you can get it.
It's in an influential paper.
It is.
Anyway, that's the roundup for today.
All right.
And I'll be back on Monday, and I'm sure stuff will happen.
Yeah. That's great for business if you're in the roundup business. That's for sure.
I suppose.
We just have to get to the business part of it at some point and, see what we can do. You know what? We can try that. Try getting paid on Twitter. I turned on a new thing today, and Twitter is launching something with tipping now. People can put little tip envelopes in there, I guess next to your little check mark. Yeah, I saw it popped up on my screen,
that
and I was
a
like,
huge investment in Bitcoin will get you a cup of coffee.
Pretty much in a couple of years from now it'll mature into something that you can maybe
that's why Jack Dorsey, the CEO, quit.
That could be it. I don't know. Maybe he was holding that back and pushing him out the door. People have been talking about it for a long time, and I don't know. You know how Twitter rolls things out unevenly. Some people get it and some people don't. And it popped up on my screen, and I said, I don't want to read about this now, and I dismissed it. And then I went looking, and then it was like, now you can't find it anymore. But while the thing was up on the screen, I saw other people's avatars there going by their screen names, and they had the little icon. And then when I dismissed the thing and said I'll read it later, all those icons disappeared. So I guess it's one of those secret club things that they let people in on 10% at a time. But I don't know. Maybe one day you put the little tip thing in next to your check mark, and I don't know. So I don't know whether people send you 10 cents at a time or whether you send it in dollars, but it does take cryptocurrency. I did note that. So, I don't know. I didn't bother with it. I just figured it was this thing that they would eventually amass some amount of money and then Twitter would boot you off and keep the money or something. So, I didn't bother. And I don't think anybody wants to pay me for making, fart jokes on Twitter. But I should find out. That's possible.
Yeah. And then,
all right.
you'll
think about it for the
weekend.
weekend.
To tell us what you did with the money.
Yeah.
Alrighty, take care.
Very
and
good.
I'll talk to you
Thank
on
you.
Monday.
You too. Have a good weekend and stay out of other people's aerosols. That's my advice to you. I'm a doctor now. We might as well just jump right into that segment. Wow. All right. Well, plenty to round up and follow up on. I would like to read a little bit more, perhaps, about what's going on in the University of Florida system, because that was very worrisome the first time around, and it's only getting worse. Let's see, other things that I wanted to chat about. Well, maybe I can discuss a little bit heading into the break. I can use this part of hour one to start talking a little bit about the Donald Trump as Speaker of the House thing. We shouldn't spend too much time on it because at this point it's highly questionable, to say the least. But I am a little worried about it because, well, it's the kind of threat that could blow up into something really, really dumb. I mean, yes, Matt Gaetz is doing it. And yes, it's possible that he might be in jail rather than in Congress next time in order to, so he won't be able to make the nomination. But you've likely heard people discussing it and some people dismissing it. And I'm a little worried about it because of the number of things that they can screw up, but also because usually the frontline dismissal of it, not by people who think it's a great idea or anything, people who know it's a terrible idea, but they don't want to spend very much time thinking about it because they say, oh, well, being Speaker of the House is a tremendous amount of work. And there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes on in the House that the Speaker has to take care of. And it's not the kind of thing that gets you, a lot of publicity. And so it seems like the formula here that things about Donald Trump lead you to believe that there's no way that he would take the job. As a matter of fact, let's see. I'll see if I can find the thing. But I had discussed it earlier and then jumped back into the discussion a little bit when I saw Karen Tumulty basically taking that approach to things and saying there's a lot of behind-the-scenes, unacclaimed work that goes on, and that's definitely not Donald Trump's scene. You don't have the chance to claim credit for all of this really difficult work. And that is true as far as it goes. There it is. Karen Tumulty tweeting yesterday. Don't indulge the fantasy that Trump may become Speaker of the House. Sure, the Constitution would allow it, but the job is too much unrecognized and largely invisible work. And she's agreed with here by Joe Lockhart tweeting, put more simply, he's never going to sit behind POTUS at the State of the Union, SOTU. POTUS at the SOTU. That's like glib, savvy folks' response to things. But if you really dug into it a little bit, it's a failure of imagination of just how much chaos you can cause. I can see this is going to carry over into the next segment too. But it worries me a little bit, not just because, that might happen or he might become Speaker. We can talk about the dynamics of that. But it worries me that, leading lights in the journalism circles still, like I say, have a failure of imagination to really think about what can go on. And they're supposed to be the ones, Karen's telling you she knows what a speaker really does. The issue here is that all of those things are done by people who care about whether the House functions or not, or whether the government functions or not. Give the job to somebody who doesn't care. And by the way, I don't think there's anybody in the audience anymore, as Karen Tumulty points out here, who doesn't understand that you don't have to be a member of the House in order to be elected Speaker. I think everybody has heard that story already, that there's no requirement that be the case. So we get past that. But think about what it means to elect somebody Speaker who isn't elected as a member of the House. a lot of the limitations on abuses of power, say, by the Speaker, a lot of powers that are granted her by the rules and by tradition are limited in the ways that she can exercise it by the fact that she is an elected official. One, of course, elected by the members of the House, and so should she lose their confidence, she could be bounced from the job. But, of course, also, you can't spend all of your time as a partisan actor and chaos agent and still be reelected to your seat normally. I mean, there are some seats that Republicans are creating through gerrymandering where perhaps you can. That's changing. But Nancy Pelosi, if she were a complete clown, for instance, and did nothing but troll Republicans in ways that made it impossible for the House to function and made it impossible for Biden's agenda to get passed, would at least be in some danger of not winning re-election in her seat. And if you're not re-elected and you have to be a member to be Speaker, then that would be a problem. If you don't, but they always choose a member, then that would be problematic. Donald Trump, of course, has his own base of power and could manipulate that into essentially intimidating Republicans, House Republicans, into voting for him. You're not going to, if you don't vote for me for Speaker, you're going to hear about it from my supporters or possibly a mob, which was a real possibility and a real thing that happened on January 6th. Not just a possibility, a real thing. But there's no limitation like there is with Nancy Pelosi on a Donald Trump. If he's not an elected member of the House, there's no seat for him to defend. Yes, he still has to retain the confidence of the Republican conference in order to win the nomination and then therefore the speakership. But I mean, the dynamics of this. He's been horrible for them. He's lost them elections. He's cost them enormous amounts of money. He's effed things up. He's, insulted their wives, attacked them when they do his bidding. Because he thinks that they didn't. I mean, Peter Mayer, for all of his reluctance to or insistence on impeaching him, votes with Trump all the time. But he wouldn't have that limitation. That's wild. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. I thought this would carry over into the next segment, and it will. I insist on it. So as I was saying, I think there's a failure of imagination among the elite, I don't mean to use that in a disparaging sense. I mean elite, Joe Lockhart and Karen Tumulty are at the top of their profession. But among the journalist types, to imagine just how much chaos there could really be. Just my I guess the pat answer I have for people who say, well, he would never do the work is, of course he would never do the work. That's not a barrier to taking the job for him. Do you guys remember he was president of the United States? That's a lot of work too. Did he do it? No. Did he do some of it? Yeah, he did some of it. And when he did it in the worst possible way. But more importantly, remember, he did things that, quote unquote, just aren't done. Things that the rules say, quote unquote, the rules say you can't do. Or, well, you have to do X, and he would just not do it. And he had the imagination, the will, and the interest in creating chaos to try things. And it's not even that I don't even feel like he had this great initiative to say, I would love to cause as much chaos as possible. It's just, even if it's just as simple as, he's got an ant brain. You have to do this. Well, I don't want to. I want to sit down and eat breakfast. So he just sits and eats breakfast. It's not like he's saying, well, how much chaos can I cause? And what will it do to the dynamics of our democracy? And I'm hungry. I want to eat the bacon. Shut up. I got to do this. Kiss my ass. I'm the president of the United States. So he just doesn't do it. And it may or may not look like a plan to the rest of us. But okay. So Joe Lockhart says, well, put more simply, right? He would never put up with, is the idea of sitting behind the president at the State of the Union. The President Joe Biden is going to deliver the State of the Union, and he's just going to sit there silently in the background. Now, interestingly, others who have a little bit more imagination than these people still didn't really hit on what I'm talking about. Some of these answers here, and they're good ones, right? So he's never going to sit behind the POTUS at the State of the Union. Some of the answers from people and I assume that they're being served up to me at the top of the list of responses to this stuff because I follow them and read their stuff. So I don't know if he was the first one to respond, but probably not. Jay Aykroyd is right at the top here saying, he'd get up and walk around as he did to Clinton during a debate. And that's certainly a possibility. Nothing, says that he has to remain there. If somebody told him you really unnerved Hillary Clinton by walking all over the debate stage while she was talking, and maybe it'll work with Joe Biden, he might try it. But, he is a lazy guy. So would he just sit there or not? I don't know. Let's see. Then other people saying, he would be making gestures or he would try to interrupt the speech or this or that. Here's the stuff I'm talking about. I'm aware of, I think, more than the average people in terms of what the speaker has control over. And there's an awful lot. And there's huge amounts of discretion involved in all of these powers that the speaker has. There's very little control over what the speaker can and can't do in the House, like the physical property of the House. It's limited by politics, generally speaking. The speaker owes her seat to the members of her caucus, and she can't exclude them from things and snub them all the time and continue to win re-election, renomination to the seat, and then therefore re-election when you hold the majority. But one of the powers, for instance, I think affects the real answer here. So, he'll never sit, it's too much work. He'll never sit behind the POTUS at State of the Union because he wouldn't stand for that. His ego couldn't take it. No, it couldn't. And he would utilize the power of the speaker to make sure that didn't happen. He would simply not issue the invitation for the president to deliver the State of the Union, nor would he permit Biden the use of the House chamber to deliver it on television. People forget that's within the power of the speaker. And it came up during the Trump administration, but only really discussed to any extent on shows like this one. But remember that Nancy Pelosi had to issue the invitation to Donald Trump to give the State of the Union. And I think that there was some dispute over what date it was to be given. And he wanted one date and she wanted another. And she issued the invitation for the date she wanted. But there's also a matter of the granting permission for the use of the House chamber. The president isn't entitled to simply take over the chamber. He's got floor privileges, but he doesn't have the right to come and speak from the rostrum. He has to be invited to do that. And there's no requirement in the Constitution that there be a State of the Union address delivered from the speaker's rostrum of the House of Representatives. There's nothing in there that doesn't even require that there be a speech. It only requires that from time to time, not necessarily once a year or around the same time or anything like that, from time to time, the president shall communicate, on the State of the Union. And it can be written and was for the beginning, in the beginning of the country for years. It's an actual speech being delivered is a modern day invention. Certainly televising the speech is a modern day invention. But speaking of that, think about the symbolism of this thing. Think about what in particular, response speeches, what the responses to the State of the Union have done and how they've traditionally, even no matter who's delivering them, no matter what party is delivering them, they kind of fall flat because the State of the Union is a very unique setting, and it conveys a lot of symbolism, and a lot of power comes from that symbolism. It's the President of the United States, televised on every network, as the responses are as well, standing on the dais, the rostrum, the speaker's rostrum, with the flag hanging behind him, and the mace is there, and the very official setting, and the nice wood, and the marble, and the carpeting, and the whole place is full, and there's applause for the applause lines, and, there's all kinds of officialdom. There's a lot of authority that gets conveyed from speaking from that setting, and it belongs to the president. And then when you do the response, no matter how dignified your speaker, and no matter how poor the State of the Union address was and how well crafted the response might be, there's no applause. It's just the person saying everything the president said is wrong. Everything my party says is right. And we're going to do this. And then there's silence. And then, like he says, maybe someone's giving the response and like, I'm here in the public library in downtown Akron, Ohio, where my friends are. It's just not the same setting. Sometimes they're just in a room with some fake law books behind them. It falls flat. It's lousy television, and everybody knows it. Now, Donald Trump, as Speaker of the House, and not giving a crap one way or the other whether things work or not, or who's mad at him about various things, just don't issue the invitation. There won't be a State of the Union speech from that place. Now, that the truth is that an incumbent president of the United States has the resources available to assemble something that would make equally compelling television. But if you, say, did something like replicate the setting of the House of Representatives, it would be all over the newspapers that you weren't in the actual House of Representatives. And then it would become, look, he faked it kind of a thing. And that won't go over well. So you come up with another thing. You could do it from a rally. And you could certainly populate a place with people who will give you applause. But when it's not the setting that everybody knows is the most powerful setting in American politics, then, it's going to lose something. So I just think Trump would, supposing he will get past all the questions of can he be elected and would he agree to take the job. But if you suppose that he does, right, he just doesn't allow Biden the use of the House chamber for the State of the Union. Well, how could you? They would never. Who would have to stand for it? Who would have to stand for it in order for him to do that? He can't lose his seat in the House. He doesn't have one. And the people responsible for making him Speaker would be thrilled to death by that prospect. They would love it. Couldn't get enough. He'd start doing it to other people. But he also, remember who else sometimes speaks from the Speaker's rostrum and what that means. For instance, like people say, he wouldn't be interested in the job because it's not, it's not the same as the presidency. You don't command an audience the same way. Yeah, you do. Not only does everybody know who the Speaker of the House is generally, I mean, Nancy Pelosi is perhaps more famous than some of the other recent speakers, even though, a lot of them were household names, but whatever. One of the things that the Speaker can do, of course, is control who speaks on the House floor and from where, by the way. But think about this. One of the other ways I put it, right, in trying to sum this stuff up. Yeah, I'm sure Donald Trump would totally be uninterested in the government job that comes with its own television network, right? I mean, how many times have we heard that Trump is interested in having his own media or television network, right? And Greg was mentioning, we have, Republicans have their own House organ television network. Well, they have several. That's Fox News, that's Newsmax, that's One America News, all that kind of stuff. But, what we didn't think of or maybe you haven't thought of, maybe you have, in this is Congress has its own television network of sorts, right? How did I put it on Twitter the other day? Oh, no, Donald Trump wouldn't take the government job that has its own television network that happens to be obligated to carry every word he says from in front of the most recognizable and validating backdrop in American politics. That Speaker's rostrum. That place carries power when you speak from it. And it would be, as Speaker of the House, his exclusive province to do so whenever he felt like it, and it would be nationally televised on C-SPAN. It might be the case that the other networks decide not to cover it, especially if he does it too often. But imagine if the things that now, or either that became his Twitter rants or that now become his press release rants that they take screenshots of and circulate on Twitter on his behalf, were live from the floor of the House of Representatives, from that spot where Americans are conditioned to understand that the leader of the country frequently speaks and gives the most important speech of the year. It's said, people believe this stuff. And he gets to do it anytime he wants. He's got the gavel. He can recognize himself to speak and recognize no one else. And then it just gets into the little stuff like, will he show up for work to do things? Most days, no. But what does that mean? That means bills that get passed by the Congress that are supposed to be sent to the president, and he doesn't like the president, Biden, to sign, aren't being engrossed and enrolled and signed by the Speaker of the House as they're supposed to be and not presented to the president. Oh no, chaos. Does he care? No, he loves it. Is it a bill that he really actually likes because it's been passed by a Republican Congress and it's going to jam up Biden when you go and send it to him? If so, then yeah. So what does he say? Send it to me at Mar-a-Lago or wherever. He gets himself a mansion in the Washington, D.C. area, but does he show up for work? Not necessarily. Bring me the papers. I'll sign them. There's nothing that says it has to be signed in the Capitol. They're being signed in the Capitol usually because that's where the Speaker is, because the Speaker usually is someone who cares about doing the job. If you don't, there's nothing in there that says you can't demand that they bring you the papers and you'll sign them there if you want them signed. And if you don't want them signed, don't sign them. But that brings us to other things. Here's a hypothetical for your con law class. If you're in law school now taking constitutional law, bring this one back for analysis. The Constitution is pretty clear about the presentment clause and all of that, and what happens when a bill goes to the president. Of course, again, remember the process we learned about how a bill gets to the president. Never mind the passage part. It's passed both houses. What happens? This is the stuff we talk about on the show. It gets enrolled, right? They check it over for mistakes and typos and everything. Make sure that the two versions passed by the two houses are in fact identical, and then they put it on. They print it on the parchment. And you saw, Donald Trump used to love to make a show of his signing bills, right? And then he would turn the little portfolio around and show it to the cameras. He made a whole production of it. Well, before it gets to the president, of course, it is signed by the Speaker of the House. And I I'm a lot less familiar with what happens in the Senate. And it might be that it's signed in the Senate side too. And I don't even know who the signatory is because the two party leaders aren't constitutional officers. Maybe it isn't signed by anybody. Maybe it's signed by the Senate President pro tem or something like that. Or I guess, the vice president as president of the Senate could sign it. I would look it up, but it doesn't matter. The point is, because he's not either of those jobs, he'd be the Speaker of the House. It requires signature. I think requires signature. I mean, it's always been getting the signature, so I assume it's required. Maybe you could make a constitutional argument that it's not, but that's not even the part I'm worried about yet. That's not the constitutional test. But suppose there's the backup. He just doesn't sign bills because he's busy golfing for a while. This one he sends, though. He likes this one. He sends it. He likes it because it's terrible. It's oppressive and harms people. Terrific. Republicans loved it. They passed it. It's a messaging bill. I'm sending it too. And I know what's going to happen. Biden's going to veto it. So here's the con law hypothetical. A terrible bill is passed. Everything goes the way it's supposed to go in Congress. But I remind you that includes getting signed by the Speaker of the House, now Donald Trump. It's dispatched to the White House. As expected, it is vetoed by President Biden. What is the veto procedure? What does the Constitution set out as the veto procedure? It says that the president has 10 days to sign or veto the bill. Remember also, one of the weird things about the presentment is that if he does neither, for whatever reason, after 10 days, the bill becomes law without his signature. So how important really is his signature? Questionable. But at any rate, the mechanism there was the founders anticipated the possibility of a president being opposed to a bill and wanting to see it vetoed, but for whatever reason not having not thinking it works out politically for him. He's afraid to actually veto it, but he still doesn't want it to become law. Can he just sit on it and not do anything and thereby either reject it or delay its enactment? And they anticipated that and said, no, primacy here belongs to the Congress. There are Article 1 favorites. We are, of course, all expecting to be members of Congress under this new system, so we gave ourselves this power. It becomes law regardless, right? What they didn't anticipate was a chaos agent in the job of the Speaker of the House. So the process is Biden vetoes it. And despite what you may have seen in Schoolhouse Rock, it's not a, ink stamp, that says veto on it. It's a veto message. You write a letter explaining your reasons for vetoing and sign that. And then you send your veto message plus the bill back to Congress. It goes back to the House, I believe, that originated the legislation. It matters in that sense, who votes on veto override first, right? That's the part that we've all maybe learned in civics and we might even have seen in action. We learned from experience it gets vetoed. It goes back to the House. We might not know which House it goes to first. Listening to this show, you learn it. The House that initiated the bill, they vote on override first. You know all about override. 2/3 of the House that originated the bill that gets the papers, right, first. The papers are important. Remember, we've learned that on the show as well. The papers arrive in your house. You vote on it. You get your 2/3. Let's say you override it. Send it to the other house. They want to override too. 2/3 in favor of overriding it. And boom, it becomes law, right? The part they leave out in describing this stuff, either in civics class or in the newspaper or whatever, is the bill and the message have to be transmitted to the House. They have to be delivered to the House. What's the actual language? I guess we could look it up. I lost my little pocket-sized Constitution, the handy one, so that's kind of annoying. So I got to look in the big, heavy, annotated one here. But as I recall, the language is, and I guess I got to look at what in Article 1 here, that the bill, along with the veto message, has to be delivered to the House that initiated. You hear that? I'm going to do the nice loud page turning so that you know it's happening here. This is not an electronic version of the Constitution. Good old paper. But, dang it, it's not, I don't have the article and section in mind. But at any rate, the real, you don't even need to know exactly what it says, but I'm pretty sure I read it the other day where it's delivery. So, okay, Biden vetoes the thing, puts together his veto message, and sends it to the House. Now, if you're a C-SPAN junkie and you watch enough, you see what it looks like when paperwork like that arrives back at the House. The clerk of the House, sends the doorman. The doorman comes in and says, interrupts proceedings at some point. They recognize him and they ask, what's going on? And he says, Mr. Speaker, a message from the President of the United States. Or, Mr. Speaker, the House has received a communication from the President of the United States in writing. Whatever. There's a formal thing. Here we are. And anyway, they announce it, and then they say, without objection, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't even know if they even ask without objection, but they note that the thing has been received, and then they go about their business. Sometimes it's a message that he's signed the bill. Sometimes it's a message that it's a veto. There's all sorts of things, but one of the things that gets messaged back to the Congress is that veto message. So every bill, here we are, it's Article 1, Section 7, every bill which shall have passed the House of Representatives and the Senate shall, before it become a law, be presented to the President of the United States. If he approve, he shall sign it, but if not, he shall return it with his objection to that House in which it shall have originated, who shall enter the objection at large on their journal and proceed to reconsider it. If, after such reconsideration, 2/3, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. Right, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so now that's back to the part that you remember. So the con law question is, terrible bill passes, it's sent to Biden, Biden vetoes it, sends the veto message back to the House of Representatives. The doorman gets there, and he says, Mr. Speaker, and he says, just a minute, hold on a second. He knows what the message is. Get the hell out of here and take those stupid papers with you. I refuse to accept delivery of the veto message from the President of the United States. And people say, it doesn't matter. We all saw him veto it on TV. Everybody knows he vetoed it. He said he was going to, and he said he did. It's vetoed. Is it? Is it vetoed? I don't know. The point is that the President's responsibility is to get that thing returned to the House. The House has refused to take delivery. Is it returned or is it not returned? It would be a better, a better case for Trump's position in this if it did in fact say delivered, but it does say returned. So it might be that you would say, well, I returned it. He refused to accept it, so I left it on his doorstep. I don't have it. He's supposed to have it, and it's near him. He's got it. There you go. But is he in possession of it? Possession's 9/10 of the law, after all. And more to the point, perhaps, what do Federalist Society Supreme Court justices think it means to return this thing to the House? I don't know. Yeah, he made an effort, but the recipient has got to take it, got to accept delivery in order for the return to be complete. If it hasn't been returned and 10 days go by, is this terrible bill a law over the president's veto without having to muster 2/3 vote? You might be able to do it and you might not be worried about it, but what if it's close, right? But Trump wants this thing to be law and just refuses to take delivery of the thing and says, I don't think it's a law. Or I think it is, rather. I think it is a law. And Biden says, I don't think so. And the Solicitor General doesn't think so. And the Attorney General of the United States doesn't think so. But where does it end up? In front of the Supreme Court. How is that going to go? You tell me. That's the con law question. That's the concern. I mean, one of many. But that's a biggie. Think about that. Yeah, and I can't put that on a bumper sticker. I couldn't even fit that in 5 minutes, even though really, honestly, it really should take about 30 seconds to say. But I get all excited about it. But think about that. Just know that that's out there. Mighty OCD chiming in here. 26 minutes ago when we started working on this, it's not just that it's so much work. Trump is not mentally capable. He's a effing moron. He can barely tie his own shoes. That's true. But again, only if you care if the work be done correctly does that enter into the equation. If you don't care, to the extent that he does care, if there's something that somebody tells him, we really need to do this, and you would agree if you listen to me for 5 seconds about why it needs to be done. They love it on Fox News, sir. Great, we'll do it. It's not that he has to figure out, well, what do I personally have to do? I better study the role of the Speaker of the House. Yeah, people will come to him and they'll say, here's the thing, just sign this thing, and then the thing you want will happen. And they might be able to manipulate him into some other things, true, but, who's he going to have serving in this role? People who are loyalists. But he needs to sign, he'll sign. Does he need to do it in the House of Representatives? No. Then send it to me at Mar-a-Lago or meet me on the golf course or whatever. I don't care. Right? Well, so many people are waiting to meet with you, sir. So what? Screw them. Kiss my ass. I'm not doing it. That's just what he does. Here, just for a second, what just popped up on my Twitter screen. January 6th ties cost, what is this? January 6th ties cost Bob Dole funeral planner job. Oh, I see. Okay. January 6th ties cost Bob Dole funeral planner job. Bob Dole is dead. I don't know if I told you that. Yeah, I did. He's, by the way, going to get the state funeral that we can never allow Donald Trump to have. And he's lying in state in the Capitol Rotunda. But guess what? So the Hill reports January 6th ties cost Bob Dole funeral planner job. Her job. Natalie Priebe, Prieb, reports this. Check this out, right? Okay, I can't scroll for some reason. Computer is slowly responding. The event planner working on, now we scrolled past it, of course. The event planner working on former Senator Bob Dole's funeral has been let go after he, there's your answer, received a subpoena by the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. It's disgraceful that a poor Dole family has to deal with this, right? Whatever. He wasn't my hero or anything, but I mean, he didn't support the insurrection, right? I don't think so. Tim Unes, U-N-E-S, allegedly had a hand in organizing the rally that occurred just hours before the attack on the National Mall that featured a speech from former President Trump in which he, the rally we're talking about. A spokesman for the Elizabeth Dole Foundation told the New York Times that Unes had volunteered with the team organizing the memorial events in Washington scheduled for this week, including when Dole lies in state at the Capitol Thursday, that's today, and the funeral service at the National Cathedral on Friday. This evening, I made Senator Elizabeth Dole aware of Mr. Younes's alleged involvement in the events of January 6th. Steve Schwab, the foundation's chief executive, told the Times. Senator Dole was previously unaware of his participation and terminated his volunteer role. Well, Abby has rung the doorbell here. We'll see if we can get it during the break. But you get the idea here. But this too is another power of the speakership. The speaker gets to determine things like whether or not someone will lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda. That will have to do jointly probably with a representative of the Senate, but you can put the kibosh on things. But you can also invite some people, and especially into your own House chamber. How about this one to ponder during the break? A speech to a joint session of Congress, an invitation being issued to Vladimir Putin to address Congress. Would Speaker Trump do that?
Hi everyone, it's me, Gil. Minimal contributor to content, but regular contributor to funding for Kagro in the morning. Let's change things up from David's so very tired plea for your contributions with a plea of my own. If you want to add your voice to the show, do it. Record your own segment using your favorite recording device and send it to David. Read an article and give your opinion. Write your own essay and read that. The sky's the limit. Well, not really. Try to keep it relatively short so David doesn't have to stress about cutting it and hurting your feelings. Join the hallowed ranks of Greg Dworkin and Joan McCarter and be part of this somewhat witty deep dive into political topics with unnecessary censoring. Lend your voice to the show by sending it to kagrox@gmail.com. KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. By the way, the doorbell ringing was our local Eagle Scout candidate here dropping off a binder so that we can review the application. My wife helps out there in the local troop that the kids are in, so good luck to him. And we'll review the binder later on. He didn't know that he couldn't ring the doorbell during a radio show. I don't tell them all what I'm doing. Anyway, so yeah, contemplate all the various ways that Donald Trump, chaos agent, can screw things up, including dumb stuff like inviting. Yeah, it's up to the Speaker of the House, right? Now, it's up to the Senate whether they want to attend a joint session, but if it's a Republican Senate, they may very well agree to do so under pressure from Speaker, and I'm sure he believes soon to become President, Donald Trump, still running the party, right? Whether or not they show up, though, doesn't really matter. He can give the use of the House chamber to Vladimir Putin if he wants to address a joint session of Congress, even if nobody decides to attend it from the Senate or half the House boycotts for that matter. The point is it would be broadcast again on C-SPAN. Does everyone realize what I'm talking about C-SPAN? C-SPAN is, of course, contractually obligated to show you whatever happens on the House floor during official proceedings. And, you know, whenever they're in session, they can't show anything else. Now, I guess in the world in which professional journalists wake up to their manipulation by Donald Trump all of a sudden, I guess they can, you know, renegotiate their contract somehow and find a way out of doing it. But, you know, they're not going to do that. This is what they're known for. So what we're talking about here is a job that comes with instant, on-demand, national broadcast access at no cost to him or his campaign, right? There's a television network that's part of every cable and, in fact, satellite system in the country and would be obligated to carry his every word. I'm sure he would be totally uninterested, right? Remember, and, you know, I know you watch the normal operations of the House, right? And the normal operation of the House is, you know, there's no such thing as a filibuster in the House because they're time limited on everything. Well, yes and no. Of course, you may have watched Kevin McCarthy give his however many hour magic minute speech. Those are rare exceptions to the rule, but something that he in fact could take it, you know, is expected to take advantage of from time to time. And the Speaker can do the same thing. But in addition, remember that it's the Speaker's job to recognize other members to speak, within the confines of the rules, of course, but to recognize other members to speak. And again, it's the political situation that constrains the Speaker or whoever he might appoint to the chair as Speaker pro tem in his absence. Speaker Pelosi doesn't sit in the chair all the time. She usually sends other members to sit in the chair. But at any rate, she's constrained by politics and propriety from doing things like, well, I'm sure, like Republicans, when they come to the floor and they lie about stuff or say terrible things about her or whatever, or anything, or just are generally annoying, I'm sure she'd rather say, yeah, shut up. You're not allowed to talk anymore. But she's constrained by rules and politics and propriety from doing so. If she were to do so, even Democratic members, for the most part, would find that outrageous, and as I convinced myself we're not allowed to say anymore, beyond the pale, right? And she would be in some trouble for it. She may or may not lose the speakership based on it, but if she made it a regular practice, surely a lot of Democrats would eventually say, this is kind of embarrassing to us. We're supposed to be about, making democracy work and free speech and free exchange of these ideas, and this is embarrassing to us institutionally. We can't have it anymore. You got to stop or we're going to kick you out. But for Donald Trump, more, give us more. That's all. They would be thrilled to death if that was the case. Imagine if every day was Louis Gohmert gets to talk as long as he wants, and Marjorie Taylor Greene gets to talk as much as he wants, Jim Jordan, and anytime Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Hakeem Jeffries, to name some of our better orators, for instance, would get up to speak. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the way she delivers things. Anybody, pick your favorite. And they stand up and say, Mr. Speaker, in the normal tone when no one else is going and looking to get addressed, and they usually rotate back and forth between the sides, right? And he just says, shut up, I'm not talking to you. Like he would handle the press conferences as president. Let me see, pointing around, scanning the room. Yes, the gentleman from whatever freaking state you're from. Jim, you, with no coat, speak. I know he's from Ohio. Does Trump? I don't know. But he would just suppose he just picks them instead. Suppose, how about other things that not everybody knows that the Speaker controls? Most of the physical building space in the Capitol complex, at least on the House side, is under the control of the Speaker's office. Again, with limitations. Sometimes a lot of these things, the power has been a little bit decentralized over the years to try to limit the power of the Speaker. And they say, well, it's really in the hands of thus and such a committee, but all the members of the committee are appointed by the Speaker. Something like that. And, like the Rules Committee, as a matter of fact, which controls how everything goes down on the floor, is pretty much known as the Speaker's Committee, even though the Speaker's not on it. But the Speaker controls office space. Again, constrained by politics and propriety, and recognizing the fact that the other party is going to have a reasonable expectation to having some office space so that they can represent their constituents. And you would be, looked upon very unfavorably, generally speaking, in terms of politics and propriety, if you were to exercise the actual power of the Speaker's office to say, F this party. So I'm Speaker Donald Trump once again. Democrats aren't going to get any office space. So I'm doubling the office space available to every Republican because of their loyalty and patriotism. Democrats, you want to meet with somebody? Meet them in Starbucks. What do I care? I should worry about whether or not Democrats can do their job. What are they going to do? Not elect me to my House district? I don't have one. What are they going to do? Vote against me for Speaker? They already did it. So no office space for you. As a matter of fact, I really like the office space that that Steny Hoyer's got in the Capitol. I have my own office, but I kind of like that too, so I'm taking it. Get out. Go screw yourself. Why not? Why not? Is he afraid of the chaos? Oh, no, there could be political backlash. The Republicans who support him wouldn't be able to get enough of it. You're not allowed to speak. You are. I give 10 minutes, but take as long as you want, to the gentlelady from Georgia, Margie. Margie, I love you. You love me too, right? Tell him how much you love me, Margie. What about refusing to accept communications from the White House, including veto measures, right? What about refusing the president the right to use the chamber for the State of the Union? What about, as somebody else in response to Joe Lockhart said, I should find out where that one went. Right, where's the Joe Lockhart one? Oh, yeah, right. This was a good one, too, I thought, right? This person guessed as well in response to Joe Lockhart, Randolph Harrison, saying, true, he wouldn't sit behind the president for the State of the Union, but he would just never extend the invitation. And I thought this was, who is Randolph, by the way? Oh, yeah, former Hill staffer himself, so he knew that there needed to be an invitation. But in addition, not only not extend the invitation, but then he would try to give the State of the Union speech himself. And people laugh. And say, that's true. But don't laugh, exactly, right? What would it take? It's just like I'm going to borrow from the movie line again, right, from Contact. What would it take to fake a signal from Vega, right? Well, what would it take to fake either being president of the United States or to give the State of the Union, a fake State of the Union? How would you fool the American people into believing that you were in charge, that you were perhaps even the president of the United States, as he's been contending all this time, that he's the legitimate president and needs to be, restored to the office? Like the craziest of the crazy Q conspiracy type people believe that, right? Not me, YouTube. I don't believe that. He's not president of the United States. Joe Biden is president of the United States. Can we be clear about that? But what would it take to fool people who are inclined to believe such a thing, that was true and that there was an official reason recognized by the government of the United States itself to believe that it was true? Well, what about if on or about the usual date of the State of the Union, Donald Trump was giving a speech from the speaker's rostrum of the House of Representatives to a packed house, speaking about, policy or whatever the hell passes for policy in his mind, and getting thunderous applause, et cetera, and it's carried gavel to gavel by C-SPAN and maybe other people. And if during the speech he said, many of you know me as Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, but the truth is I'm also President of the United States and always have been. And that's why I am giving the State of the Union address from the House of Representatives, and the faker Joe Biden is not. Wow, what happens? What's the reaction? What's the reaction internationally, too, besides making us a laughingstock? Who's the president of the United States? Which leads me to the next question. Other people observed, well, the real idea here behind Matt Gaetz' stupid fantasy is that if we make Donald Trump Speaker of the House, that makes him second in, depending on how you count, second or third in line to the presidency behind the vice president, Kamala Harris. And I think the Republican fantasy in all this is, well, we'll make him Speaker of the House and put him in line for succession to the presidency, and then we'll impeach and remove, I don't know how they're going to do that in the Senate, but impeach and remove both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and then the Constitution says Donald Trump becomes president of the United States, as he should be, and then we restore him to the presidency. That's part of the fantasy. But let's say it doesn't work. Let's say they can't get the votes in the Senate to convict and therefore can't remove them from office. And they agree, instead of having another insurrection and just murdering them, they will say, darn, we tried our best and we can't get them out of office. And we acknowledge constitutionally that they're still there. I don't know why they would do that, but let's say they do that. And Donald Trump remains president of the United States, Speaker of the House at this point. But then 2004 rolls around and he runs for president. Then I say, another con law question for you here. Let's say he wins. Right? Well, everybody knows what happens next because something. I watched The West Wing, and there was a thing, or maybe another, was it a movie? Did The West Wing do it at some point where I don't know, it must have been a movie, not The West Wing, but something similar, right? Where the Speaker of the House has to take over as president, and, there's a whole scene where the Speaker resigns the speakership to take the presidency. So here's the question. Does Donald Trump resign the speakership in order to accept the presidency should he win the 2024 election? And people are like, well, duh, of course he has to. He has to. He has no choice. Oh, is that right? He has to? Okay, well, that's settled. I'll just send him a telegram and tell him that he has to and see if that works. Just like, what's his name? The other MM guy who was chief of staff for a while. Mick Mulvaney, right? Wasn't he? He was OMB chief. And then he was made acting chief of staff at the White House. And he just said, I'm just going to be both OMB director and chief of staff at the White House. That's not exactly the same thing. It's not a constitutional officer. Yes, you learned in con law and in civics that, there's a prohibition. There's a separation of powers here. You can't be both the highest ranking official of Article 1 legislature and the highest ranking official of the Article 2 executive at the same time. That's not done. There wouldn't be separation of powers. The Supreme Court would surely say, ask yourself, what does the Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and what's her name, Barrett, not to mention Roberts, court say about this? Roberts is embarrassed. He's upset. But does the rest of them care? As a matter of fact, what the hell? They might not even care up until the point where, as president/speaker, he nominates himself as chief justice as well. Roberts can't take it anymore. He's on mental breakdown and leaves the job. He resigns. And Trump nominates himself. I'm the head of all three branches, as I should be. And his fans go crazy. They can't. And who stops him? Right? Just like he decides he's going to recognize other people, only Republicans to speak. Who stops him? I object, Mr. Speaker. I don't recognize you to object. Shut up. And of course, if push comes to shove and somebody somehow blurts out an objection and the parliamentarian intervenes and says, we have to entertain this objection. Mr. President/Speaker of the House / Mr. Chief Justice, who presides at his own impeachment trial next time. The rule book says we've got it. Well, fine. Let's have a vote. All those in favor of telling this guy to shut the hell up, say aye. And you better say aye, or I'll send federal troops to your house to kill your family. Okay. Well, that kind of settles it. So, but really, why not try to give the speech himself? Wouldn't everybody end up believing maybe Q was right? He is president of the United States, or just as good as the president of the United States, certainly. He is, after all, giving this famous speech, which only the president of the United States can give, unless it's somebody else. Oh, well. So as I mentioned, right, the normal constraints are off. He doesn't have a House seat to win. Let's see, what other things did we say? I think we might have covered all of this. Oh, yeah, right. We got to him inviting Vladimir Putin to address a joint session of Congress. I tweeted all these things the other day. What about this? Does Speaker Trump, in control as he is over events in the House, he also is, of course, the boss of the House Sergeant at Arms, who is, of course, the boss, at least from the House side, of the Capitol Police. Does Speaker Trump order the House Sergeant at Arms to forbid the Capitol Police from, say, responding to, the Proud Boys' occupation of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's office? Don't send the cops. I don't care. Well, maybe the Senate will. The Senate is going to say, well, we're going to send cops to save AOC? I don't think so. It's not our business anyway. It's on the House side. So in come the Proud Boys. They march in whenever they want and, beat up the staff and try to kidnap AOC. Send the cops? Don't send the cops. I say don't send them. She deserves what she gets. And the cops say, I don't know. I feel like I have an obligation to go. Well, if you go, you're fired. I'm the House Sergeant at Arms. Who the hell is that, right? Like right now, it's a person who would not do that. But believe you me, that Speaker Trump finds out pretty quick who he can hire and fire there and just hires one of his friends. Roger Stone is now the House Sergeant at Arms. Do they do anything? Do they send cops to stop the Proud Boys? No, they don't. Any day can be January 6th when Speaker Trump controls the Capitol Police. Any day you guys show up, planned, unplanned, whatever. You're not allowed to search Proud Boys for weapons. They can go around the metal detectors. Well, why not? Why wouldn't Speaker Trump do this? And why wouldn't Republicans want Speaker Trump to do this? At least the craziest ones. And the ones who are not crazy, like, I don't know, Peter Mayer. What does he do? And what do his colleagues do? I'm afraid they're going to murder my family unless I allow him to do this. So what do you think the vote total is going to be? So what else can happen? Can Speaker Trump shut down a Biden administration by refusing to sign and transmit enrolled appropriations bills? There's now a government shutdown. Republicans shy away from it in the House and the Senate. They don't want it. They passed the appropriations bills. They are drastically cutting all, human services and safety net programs to show off. But Trump says, I wouldn't even give him a thing. I say shut down the government. But he's overruled. And they vote. He allows the vote to go forward because he can't figure out how to stop it and no one tells him, right? So they vote. They send the bill to be enrolled. He says, I'm not signing it. Does the government shut down? I don't know. There's nothing in the Constitution about what to do if the bills don't get enrolled. What else? Somebody else was saying, who's this? Oh, Scott Wong from The Hill saying, here's just a totally unrelated story, right? Senior Dem aide says that if Representative Cawthorn brought this individual, somebody he brought onto the House floor. Who was it, by the way? It's a Republican candidate for Congress, maybe also from South or North Carolina. I don't know. I'll scroll back. Here we are. Here's all the answers. Anyway, the tweet I was reading says, Senior Dem aide says if Cawthorn brought this guy into the House floor, it's, quote, likely a violation of House Rule 4, which governs who can access the hall of the House. And then he has a screenshot of the whole printout of the rule. Anyway, take his word for it. Here's what was happening, scrolling back a little bit. Some GOP lawmakers were very surprised to see House candidate Robbie Starbuck, a Republican in Tennessee, on the House floor during votes last night. Now, this was tweeted yesterday, so this would be Tuesday night votes. Unclear how Starbuck gained access to the House floor. Only current and former members are able to step onto the floor, or House staffers who are managing time. For a candidate for Congress to walk around on the floor and talk to people, I found it to be very bizarre, said one GOP lawmaker. It's a violation of the House rules without a doubt, the lawmaker says, unless the Sergeant-at-Arms legitimately gave him permission. Oh, Sergeant-at-Arms Roger Stone? Yeah, he may have done this. So, like I point out, Speaker Trump absolutely allows this. There's no doubt about it. Right? It's a violation of the House rules, but he just says, go ahead. What do I care? Go ahead and do it. So what other things might he allow to happen here? Oh, okay. I've lost all the thread by clicking through here, but you get the idea. There's an awful lot, just like Karen Tumulty says, there's a lot of work involved in the speakership, and you might ordinarily think this is something that Trump wouldn't want to do, but there are no consequences to not doing it properly. As I said, also, Speaker Trump would grant and strategically withhold Capitol Police protection to members, whether on Capitol Hill or back at home, based on the demonstrations of personal loyalty to him, including here that piece, a clip from that Tim Alberta piece about people who were afraid for their families, right? He might say, loyal Republicans get guards outside their house provided by a newly expanded Capitol Police, and Democrats don't. That's the kind of chaos we're talking about. This is the sort of... the question is whether you believe, one, that House Republicans will be able to foresee the chaos and the backlash to the chaos being visited upon them and want to avoid that. If Donald Trump were actively interested in taking the job, and they'll say, I will defy him and deny it to him if he wants it, and consequences be damned, or whether they'll say, I can see it coming, but I'm afraid to say no. I don't know. So figure it out, what you think the dynamics will lead to here. But once he gets in, be aware of how bad it can be. Not just, he's not going to show up and do the job and he's going to quit. He'll revel in not doing the job correctly. All right. Let's see. A couple of other things that perhaps I ought to mention before jumping out the door for today. Let's see. Why don't we head over to this one here? I picked up on this from the Hill yesterday. Manchin, you know him, Joe Manchin, quietly discusses Senate rules changes with Republicans. Not entirely sure what to make of this, but at least I want to put it on the record. Jordan Carney writes for the Hill on this one. A lot of Hill materials. Joe Manchin, a key Democratic holdout on reforming the filibuster, is discussing small changes to Senate rules with Republicans. Manchin's discussions with GOP colleagues, which haven't been previously reported, come as Democrats are trying to win over their conservative colleagues on their push to, quote, restore the Senate, including making changes to the 60-vote legislative filibuster. Members of the GOP leadership told The Hill that Manchin has reached out to them to float potential ideas with an eye toward making it easier to get votes and bills to the floor. Most of us would argue that the only thing that it takes to get the Senate working better is behavioral change, but he is trying to come up with some fairly, I would say, creative ideas about the rules, said Senator John Thune of South Dakota, the number 2 Senate Republican, and he really is number 2. Thune added that Manchin had spoken with other GOP senators and that there was a considerable amount of interest in trying to make the Senate functional. Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri confirmed that Manchin had also talked to him. You know, I had a lot of conversations, a lot of discussions with Schumer on this topic when he was the ranking member on rules and I was the chairman, and we could reopen that discussion, he added, referring to Senate Majority Leader Charles Schumer of New York, of course. Manchin says he hasn't changed his mind on the filibuster, where he's opposed to nixing the 60-vote threshold altogether or making a carve-out. But asked by The Hill if he was open to smaller changes, like making it easier to get amendment votes or bills to the floor, Manchin indicated that talks are ongoing. I've been talking to Republicans and Democrats. How do we make the place work so we can treat each other like human beings and try to get something accomplished and do the job we're supposed to do, Manchin said. Anyway, Manchin added that they were talking about any rules that would basically help this place work. Thanks for the specifics. The discussions involving Manchin and GOP senators come as a group of Democratic senators, as opposed to Joe Manchin, tapped by Schumer, are trying to come up with rules change proposals that would help break the stalemate on voting rights and election legislation, which has been filibustered by Republicans. 2 Democratic senators taking part in the Democratic-only discussions, Senators Tim Kaine and John Tester, indicated that Manchin's talks were a separate effort and said that they had not dispatched him to go talk with Republicans. You know, Joe will be Joe. We don't control anybody around here, Tester said. Thune floated that Manchin's talks could be a back-channel effort to dial down pressure on Democrats to make changes in the filibuster. I think part of maybe his motivation, too, is just to take the pressure off of that. And if we could get some things done that would make it more conducive to accomplishment, then he wouldn't feel, and others wouldn't feel, as much pressure to nuke the filibuster, Thune said. Frustration in the Senate has been growing among Democrats as they've seen some of their biggest priorities, including voting rights, stalled in the Senate, where 60 votes are needed to advance most legislation. Though Schumer wants to pass voting rights this year, Democrats have acknowledged it could get kicked to at least January. Even Republicans have vented about the chamber's rules as they've seen debate on bipartisan bills, including a sweeping defense bill or China competitiveness legislation, dragged out for weeks by a small group of members. Under the Senate's rules, every member must agree to a floor vote, or doing so eats days of the Senate's time. A single senator can slow down a court or administration nominee, block an amendment vote, or force a measure to meet the 60-vote threshold. There's been casual discussions for some time. Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota told The Hill, there aren't that many things that they expect us to get done every single year, but we should be in a position to get those things done in a timely fashion. I think there's a lot of us that feel that way, Rounds added about the frustration over the gridlock. The talks aren't the first time senators have tried to win bipartisan support for small changes to the Senate rules. Blunt chaired the Rules Committee when Schumer was the top Democrat on the panel in 2015 and 16. And a bipartisan group was covering largely the same ground in talks earlier this year, but those talks petered out on getting to an agreement. Oh, yes, and I'm a little bit behind in starting our outro music here, so pardon us there, Justice. We'll be a little bit late leaving. But anyway, I'll get you a little more of this. Senator John Cornyn said he hasn't spoken to Manchin, but acknowledged that the frustration over gridlock leads to the chatter. There have been discussions about those issues as long as I've been here, Cornyn said. Everybody gets frustrated at different times by the rules that we operate under, which, rather than foster full debate, which is what the Senate is supposed to do, seems to restrict debate and votes. A growing number of Senate Democrats support nixing the 60-vote filibuster, arguing that it's being abused by Republicans, though both Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are opposed to doing so. Schumer recently vented that a single GOP senator, Marco Rubio, in fact, used Senate rules to block amendment votes on the defense bill. It speaks to the need to restore the Senate and change these rules, Schumer said. Well, under discussion, changing the filibuster to require 41 no votes to block a bill rather than 60 yes votes to advance a bill, and reverting to a talking filibuster. To change the rules with a bipartisan support, though, senators typically need, the way they say it, 67 votes. No, they don't. They need a bare majority. They just need 67 to invoke cloture on a motion to change the rules. But hey, you know that. Nothing earth-shattering this one, just sort of letting you know that there are small bore discussion going on out there. But for large bore discussion, but not boring, stay tuned for Justice
From
next.
NetworksRadio.com.
That's weird, large bore. Can you say that?
Listening to Kagro.
I'm a large bore.
With David Waldman.
Well, he's not. And here's what he's got on tap for you today. Let's see. Meadows' frivolous lawsuit against the January 6th committee will go nowhere. That's his prediction. And the North Carolina Supreme Court has halted the March primary to review lawsuits over Republican-controlled illegal gerrymanders. Amazing. I'm glad that's going to get some attention. Hope we can win.